Identified. Hostile truck.
Welcome to Polygon's overview segment. I'm Charlie Hall. Joining me today, Mr. Brian Crecente. How are you doing, Brian?
Pretty good. How about you, Charlie?
Not too shabby. Now, you, sir, unless I'm mistaken, have played more than a little bit of a little game called World of Tanks, have you not?
I have, though I think it's fair to say it was under duress.
I know your dad's a big fan of that as well, right?
That's what I think. If you could say that people are big fans of meth, then yes, my dad's a big fan of World of Tanks.
What we're looking at is not World of Tanks. This is actually a brand new game. Polygon enjoyed it during a press-only preview weekend. And this is called Armored Warfare. And it's by a little company called Obsidian? Obsidian, yeah. Brian, is making a tank game? So
weird. But, you know, I have to say, like, if anybody could pull off making something that they've never made before, it would be Obsidian.
And they're also doing it under contract or in partnership with Mail.ru, which is a massive company. And, you know, they've come to the conclusion, and I don't think they're too far off, that World of Tanks has started a new genre. And this tank warfare genre is missing, I don't know, 2 or 3 other competitors. So Armored Warfare is a competitor that picks up from the time period of the Korean War and goes pretty much up into the late Cold War and into some of the modern pieces of armor that we would see on the battlefield in places like Afghanistan and Syria. So what we're looking at right now is actually one of the later model Russian tanks. And this is a T-64 that is actually duking it out at extraordinarily close range with an armored personnel carrier. And boy, howdy, did he ever finish him off.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I talked to Obsidian back at DICE, which was, I guess, in February. And they were telling me about this. And there were no qualms. They said straight up that they were doing their best to essentially copy a bulk of what World of Tanks was doing. Like World of Tanks established the genre, and to make a competitor, you have to hit all the high notes that World of Tanks had created.
The ranges that you're going to be engaging with other tanks and having it be a deadly engagement is, I feel, a lot further out than it is in World of Tanks. And that's just because the massive calibers of weapons that these main battle tanks are working with. But then there's also armored personnel carriers, as well as some light tanks. There's even some self-propelled guns and artillery pieces. But then, Brian, you were also talking to them, they were planning even smaller, faster units like Jeeps.
Yeah, I mean, when I talked to them, they sort of, remember, this is back in February, so things may have changed.
Right.
But, you know, a lot of what they were doing is sort of pulling from the playbook of World of Tanks. And World of Tanks concept is really, I think, that there's this whole generation of hardcore gamers who played first-person shooters, loved them, got old, could not keep up because their reflexes are too slow. And so World of Tanks slows that down. It's a first-person shooter, but for people who don't have those, you know, lightning reflexes they used to have. And I think what Obsidian's doing is taking that idea, running with it, and essentially creating classes. So like you've got the artillery, which is meant to be like a sniper class. And I guess the Jeep would be like a scout class. What did you see when I didn't get a chance to play it? Did you see anything other than tanks in your playthrough?
I ran around in a couple APCs. Something about the smallest thing I ran around in was an M113, an American M113. Very small, but it had like a decent caliber autocannon on top of it. And that thing is just a run and gun type of scouting vehicle. It was very fast, very lightly armored, but also a lot of fun to kind of take up hills and into places that some of these larger tanks, like again this T-64, just can't get to. I didn't get a chance to play with any of the artillery or the self-propelled, the larger weapons that kind of act like those snipers. But really, I thought that the ballistics of it was really well modeled, as was the heads-up display. I think they nailed this HUD. It was giving me a lot of information and telling me what I needed to know to find and destroy targets in a timely manner. And the rounds were really quick, honestly. Maybe rounds were lasting anywhere from 15, 20 minutes tops. So it's able to get a lot of reps in.
That sounds a little faster than World of Tanks. I think the thing that they will have to do to sell it as a maybe not even a competitor, but sort of a game you might play on top of World of Tanks, is that they're really going to have to nail the authenticity of both the look and feel of the tanks. There have been some other games that have sort of played around with this and have completely failed on that level. World of Tanks spends a lot of time and money and development time making sure that they really get those tanks down, especially early on. They did that, so I think that's going to be a deal breaker. What did you feel like? I don't know what your exposure is to real world tanks, but did you feel like these were well modeled tanks?
I really thought that they were very well modeled. The different hit locations is what I keyed off of and really enjoyed a lot. Right here, you see me getting nailed right in the rear where some of my fuel cells are, and that catches on fire. But also, I was tracking people. I was being tracked. I was getting ricochets off of the angled armor plating on the turrets and the hulls. So it really did feel like a good representation of the tanks to me. But also the battlescapes themselves, I was really impressed by. In the opening moments of each map, you'll have kind of thematic things. We're driving around a crashed C-130 Hercules right now that just took a header right into the middle of the map in the opening moments. And the destructible environments are very effective, I thought.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that's one of the places where there are a couple places where this game can, I think, attract an audience that are hardcore World of Tanks players. One is that you look at World of Tanks, which is essentially World War I and World War II, I guess it almost, I think it goes a little bit past World War II, but essentially those battlegrounds are very locked. You don't have a lot of, I don't think there's not a lot of differences between those battlegrounds. But then you look at modern tank warfare and you've got all kinds of settings you can mess around with and still remain authentic. So I think that's going to help them. The other thing that will help them is that unlike the World War II tanks, the modern tanks have all kinds of bells and whistles. So I think that'll be interesting. Again, I don't know what they included, but it's like a modern aircraft almost. There's some of the things you can do with the modern tank.
Oh yeah, and it's just overwhelming. But I didn't see a lot of those bells and whistles. I didn't see any of your ATGM anti-tank guided missiles. I didn't see any infrared smoke screens or anything like that. It was pretty much vanilla tank-based ballistic warfare. But I look forward to some of those higher end systems like you're talking about. This artillery strike that you're going to see right here is pretty crazy. Some of the effects that they've got going on in the game, just the way that the shock waves affect the terrain when you let off a few rounds is really impressive.
I'm curious, the settings, I know again this was a press demo, so probably not a lot there, but were the settings different? Were they interesting?
We had a desert setting that was very heavily inspired by a place like Saudi Arabia or Kuwait. We had this very European, Eastern European snowy landscape, and then there was also kind of almost a jungle setting as well. So I thought it was pretty various. I was pleased with the different settings that they've got. I don't know. I think it's up to them to really differentiate themselves more from World of Tanks. And we're going to see more of that as they go into kind of an open beta in the coming weeks here. So thanks again for the time, Brian.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.